I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, Secretary. Congratulations on your new position. I'd like to take us to something that's very close to me and my home state. That's the Great American Outdoors Act. Mm-hmm. That law was passed by Congress last year, signed into law by President Trump. My predecessor, Senator Lamar Alexander, had a great deal to do with that, and I want to voice my appreciation for his efforts. The Great American Outdoors Act is going to reduce a $12 billion maintenance shortfall in our parks by about half, and the revenues to address this come from energy development, both onshore and offshore. I think it's got tremendous potential, particularly when I think about my home state, because we have the Great Smoky Mountains National Park there. Some 12 million visitors a year. It's the most visited national park in America. Mm-hmm. And if I look at what's happening right now, comparing 2021 to 2019, which was the last year of normal operation, in the first 4 years of 2021, we are up 1 billion visitors already versus the record that was set back in 2019. So my sense is that as Americans come back out and seek the great outdoors, we're going to see even more pressure on that great resource in the Great Smoky Mountains. Mm-hmm. The park right now has a $235 million maintenance backlog, and the majority of that backlog is tied up in roads, trails, restrooms, visitor centers, things of that nature. And the Great American Outdoors Act has already begun to reduce that burden. But I want to emphasize that we've got to make sure that we have the funds ready and sustain the investments into the future on this property. Senator Holland, can you discuss for me how your department will prioritize which projects out of this backlog will be funded by the Great American Outdoors Act?
Thank you so much for the question, Senator. And so first, what I could say is that every bureau selects projects a little bit differently, but essentially, reducing the deferred maintenance backlog is the priority. And that means focusing on projects where funds will have the most impact. For the National Park Service especially, that means we're using funds for some of our larger and more complex projects that are difficult to fund through annual appropriations. And these also include our large transportation and water system projects. It doesn't mean that anything in the Great Smoky Mountains wouldn't be prioritized. And we also want to mention that the President's budget request for the Great Smoky Mountains National Park is $23 million. That's an increase of $2.4 million from 2021. So those increases include $500,000 for fixed costs like employee pay increases, $1 million for research learning centers, $900,000 for natural resources restoration. Mm-hmm. The budget also includes a $14.5 million in Great American Outdoors mandatory funds to rehabilitate and expand the park's Sugarlands headquarters. Yes.
Foothills Parkway, too, I think, is on that list.
Perhaps, yes.
And I appreciate your continued attention to that, Madam Secretary. It's critically important to the people of Tennessee, but everybody in this side of America. This is the most visited national park in the nation, and I think very worthy of the attention that I know that you and your team will pay to it. I'd like to turn to another issue that is not unique to Tennessee, but it's something that is creating a huge problem, and that is Asian carp. And the species of Asian carp are predatory. They are destroying our waterway systems, the ecosystems within our state, whether they be lakes, streams, waterways. They reproduce multiple times a year. They have no natural predators, and they are endangering our lakes and rivers in Tennessee. And also, I'd highlight this. We have one of the most valuable ecosystems in the world in the Mississippi River Basin. That's coming under fire from this breed of carp. If you look at what the economic impact of this is, fishing and recreational boating generates $7.2 billion of annual economic value in my state of Tennessee, supports over 27,000 jobs. So this has not only an environmental impact, but it has an enormous economic impact as well. And we find Asian carp now all the way from Chattanooga to Memphis. It's rapidly evolving and incredibly invasive. And thanks to the leadership of this subcommittee, in the past 2 years, Congress has provided over $25 million a year to the Fish and Wildlife Service to help contain the spread. I'd just like to get your input on how the funds have been distributed across the states, and how that funding will have an impact on containing the spread. I'd love to get your perspective, Madam Secretary.
Thank you so much. And yes, we're quite aware, invasive species, we understand how important and dire this situation is. The Fish and Wildlife Service has found that contract fishing is very successful in combating invasive carp. I will have Rachel, if she has a moment, to highlight a little bit of the numbers for you.
Thank you.
But I can tell you that contract fishing has been an important tool in this issue, and we're more than happy, of course, to stay in touch with you about that progress.
Yeah, I can follow up with your staff, Senator, to provide additional detail with what's in the 22 request. But I think, as the Secretary said, we are well aware of the bipartisan interest from the subcommittee, and well aware of the success that we've had in some of the investments, and look forward to working with you going forward.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate your doing that, and I certainly intend to speak with Shannon Estenez, who's your nominee for Assistant Secretary. We want to stay on this issue and work closely with you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.